Hey, and welcome again, everybody. Thanks for being with us for our webinar this afternoon, day 2 of our week-long transition to adulthood week at RIPIN. This is in lieu of our regular transition conference, transition to adulthood parent conference. We obviously can't gather in person this year for that, and so we are having this virtual week of different webinars, videos, informative sessions, resources, and we're really glad to have you join us. Today, we're going to be talking about independent living, and I am joined by my RIPIN colleagues, Crystal Cerullo and Sue Donovan, part of our Transition to Adulthood team and our PTIC, our Parent Training Information Center here at RIPIN. And I also have Sharon Koshin with us today, is joining us. And we are very, very pleased to welcome our two guests, Joanne Delangelo. I'll introduce first. If you want to say hello, Joanne.
I would love to say hello. Hello to everyone. Hello to our parents that are listening today and everyone that's sharing this time with us. To Mark, to Crystal, to Sharon, to Sue, thank you. And hello to everyone. I'm looking forward to your questions and to spending this time with all of you.
Excellent. And a little bit about Joanne quickly. Joanne is the project director for the National Center for Innovation and System Improvement and the East Bay Regional Transition Coordinator. And she has over 25 years of professional experience in the areas of secondary education and transition, workforce development, project management and training, along with 4 years of experience in higher education as an academic learning specialist at Bryant University. And Joanne holds a Master's of Education in Higher Education Counseling from Providence College. We are also joined today by Therese Monroe Curran. If you want to say hello, Therese.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome and thank you. Therese received her BS with distinction from the University of Rhode Island and an MA in Rehabilitation Counseling from Salve Regina University. She is the Director of Transition and Vocational Services for West Bay Educational Collaborative and the West Bay Regional Transition Coordinator through the Rhode Island Department of Education. And a little bit about that briefly, the West Bay RTC, West Bay Regional Transition Coordinator, is the Center of Excellence for the transition of students with developmental disabilities. Therese has 30 years of experience working with adults and youth with disabilities and their families in transition, life planning, self-advocacy, and expanding employment outcomes. Again, welcome to Therese, welcome to Joanne, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And so I know you have a few slides and you can feel free to present those however you like.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of start off because when we talk about independent living, it's one of those, what isn't independent living sometimes is the conversation, because it really does encompass a lot of different things. So it will be individualized to your son or daughter or your family member. But these are just some pictures of some of our students from our Transition Academy involved in some of the daily living, independent living skills, grocery shopping, caring for the apartment, but also recreation and community participation, developing social skills, transportation, money management, making decisions and executive functioning. So this kind of runs the gamut for different things that we can talk about. So, and Joanne, jump in if you.
Yes, I will. I love to, and I try very hard to, not interrupt. I love when you're speaking about independent living. It's so much of a passion, and all the work that you've done with students as they, move on their transition to adulthood. But you're right about it being individualized. And when you take a look at these pictures, you just can't help but just see a wonderful life. You see joy, you see, and the conversations about how do you want to spend, your life? How can we help you explore it and teach you how to navigate, the life that you're creating for yourself? And that's what I see when I see this. I mean, even like, decorating your apartment. I remember my first apartment. I had like a couch, a table, but I loved putting my first pictures up on the wall. It was mine. And that's what, the apartment living, and then even just some of the great food that they create in their kitchen and the recipes. I was like, wow, I'm going over there for dinner. But yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm glad I was able to advance my slides. Success.
Yeah.
So I was really looking for something that would define independent living, because there is a lot of different things that define independent living. The closest I came to something that I would probably use is those skills or tasks that contribute to successful living, independent living, of an individual in adulthood. So when you're transitioning from school to adulthood, thinking about all of the areas that you can become as independent as possible. When we talk about the areas of the IEP, there's post-secondary education and training, employment, and then independent living, which is always followed by the if appropriate. But really for all people, outside of work and education, there's a lot of different things that you do during the day. You can work 8 hours, but there's still another 16 during the day. And you need to be able to, whoops. Sorry.
You spoke too soon, my friend. Now they're going on their own.
You need to be able to fill up your life with things that matter to you, not just work. And then to be able to take care of yourself, to get along and develop relationships with people who are close to you and also people in the community. So this is just a sampling of how they've broken it down into home living. And it doesn't necessarily mean moving out into an apartment. I've worked with students whose parents have, moved into houses that had in-law apartments, and the young person has transitioned into that. Other people have moved into apartments with a roommate who is doing some work through BHDDH as a roommate, but also as a support staff. So there's a lot of different ways that it can be done for people. There's no timeline for when somebody needs to move out, or even if they have to. Household and money management is something that you want to start with young. Nowadays, it's not as much about counting money as it is about swiping that credit card or using the cell phone to Apple Pay, which is very easy to do. But if you're not budgeting your money, you're going to stand in line and then step up and say there's no money in your account. Mm-hmm. Never happens to me.
And also too, under that, Therese, like we've talked about before, and actually in one of the videos on the schedule for today with one of the parents, I think of Jamie, in regards to really understanding that people will take advantage of someone and their money and their credit card or their debit card, and how to be mindful of those kind of safeties too in managing your money.
Absolutely. And I think, for most parents, safety is something that kind of threads through all of these areas.
Yes.
Definitely. But law and politics, understanding your rights, voting, it's been very important this year. Personal safety and interpersonal relationships, and self-advocacy. There we go. So we had done a training with some teachers earlier this month, talking about the different areas of the IEP. And we did independent living. That was the area that I focused on. And we kind of talked about involving families in, especially now with distance learning. We're seeing that families are really seeing what students are doing in their day-to-day school activities. And for our students at the Transition Academy, a lot of it has to do with life skills. So, a lot of our parents are giving us direct feedback on the performance. It used to be whenever we'd have a meeting with a family, we'd be working on all kinds of life skills, cooking and shopping and budgeting. And then the first thing they'd say to us is, well, he doesn't do it at home. Well, you got to make them do it at home.
Right.
Now that there's that link, it's been really positive for us to see what they're being able to accomplish when they're at home. Your kitchen at home doesn't look like the kitchen that you're learning in at the apartment. You know, you could have an electric stove versus a gas stove or whatever. So a lot of those things were really making the connection to real life. And any demonstration, whether it be out in the community, grocery shopping with family, you know, using the debit card to pay for something, those are all authentic assessments, and they're really great feedback for educators to get on how people are working in the community, because the best assessment of somebody's skills is an authentic assessment, not something that they're doing in a classroom, not something they're doing on a checklist or a video, something they're actually doing out live and in person.
And if I could just add with that, you know, even just that word, think about that word, authentic assessment, and, you know, please be open and be mindful of the individual in community. Many times, you know, ourselves or adults, and you know, no fault to anyone, but like, oh no, there's no way that he or she could do that in the community if they're struggling in the classroom or something. But sometimes, and many times, they're able to be more functional in the community, and some, you know, skills that might not be translated or be trouble translating because you're not sure, when you put them in an environment that they're more comfortable in and things happen, you're like, wow, I had no idea he or she would be able to transfer those skills into the community. So
yeah, absolutely. And usually families, especially now with people spending a lot more time at home together, families really have a much better idea of what people are able to do. And I know cooking has been a big one. You know, families cooking together, doing that, you know, that's really been helpful. And we've gotten families to actually take videos of students cooking meals or, you know, serving, which has been great.
Because, you know, Sue, you say environment can change everything. Absolutely. I mean, because remember, in transition, we're thinking about how we're preparing our students and individuals every day for the next environment that they're going to be in. So what is going to be needed in that next environment, right? And how do we prepare them accordingly?
I like to tell families that we're working with at RIPIN that we're raising adults. We're not raising children. We're raising them to be adults. So what is that going to look like for them? And what do we need to start on? And as a family, we found that we needed to start early. We needed to start early, and we needed repetition. And we needed an outside look, you know, so we needed to work with the IEP team, and we needed to work with the professionals so that they could let us know what they were seeing in their environment, so that we could try to make sure we're challenging at home, that we're keeping our expectations high. Because as a parent, it's so it's so easy to overlook all of the little things that we do every day, all day long, for our children or for our partners, because it's just natural, it's just second nature, and not realizing, oh gee, you know, can your child manage their own meds? Can they manage their own schedule? Do they need help making a telephone call, a phone call? Do they need help setting the wash machine or the dryer? Do they know how to do that? So you really have to take a step back.
Yeah, and there are, like I said, there are so many different areas that involve independent living. You know, not just the, you know, the actual skill development that might be cooking or budgeting, but self-control, things that have to do with executive functioning, communications, making connections on your own with other people and in your community, critical thinking skills, being able to take on a challenge and not avoid things, and self-directed learning, being engaged in what you're being engaged in the learning part of your life. So those are all areas that can be worked on too. We had the handouts. Did everybody receive those before? We had let me see.
We have the parent, you mean what we had provided, Teresa,
Yeah.
for everyone? Right, so we have the parent survival guide, was a handout. We have the DCDT fact sheet, which is very informative. From NTAC, from our National Training Center, their at-home resources, which are very detailed. And I know that those will be sent or available for everyone.
Yeah, so we're going to make those available on the RIPIN website on our Transition to Adulthood Week webpage. We'll also email them to folks who are with us on Zoom and who joined us today via Zoom. Okay. And I do want to mention quickly, if you're with us on Zoom and you want to submit your questions, you can feel free to type them in. If you're watching the live stream on YouTube, you can type your questions into the chat there. If you're watching it on the RIPIN Facebook page, you can type your question into the comments, and our panelists will be happy to try to answer them for you.
I did kind of, my question when I started looking at all of this was, it can be overwhelming. So from the parents' perspective, when you have to dig through all of these things, like Sue, you were saying, you know, I have to start early and I have to figure out what they can do. What types of, how would you kind of dig through that and prioritize? What would be your thoughts on that?
And I'm going to ask my friends here, my fellow RIPINers, to chime in as well. But I found it important for me to do a reality check, because I do find it difficult to be objective with my own children. It's easier for me to help you with your children than for me to be objective with my own. So, you know, folks say that my husband is a man of few words, but when he does speak, people listen. And so I always made sure I would bounce things off of him or my sister or one of the grandparents and say, what do you think about this? Do you think this is something my daughter would be successful at doing? Or I'd bring a fair, this is what I'm worried about. What do you think? And then we problem solve around that. And it's like, okay, where's the safety net? How can we teach this skill without, without Sue having a panic attack, And so really getting others' input and really personalizing the supports to her needs so that she could be successful. And that safeguard, it's when you're still living at home, right? There's a lot that you can do. And you've got that backup. You still have that backup support. So, that's what I would suggest. And I remember going to I remember in 6th grade saying to her case manager, who was phenomenal, okay, I want her at the IEP meeting, even if it's just for 10 minutes, and then we can boot her out, but let's bring her in for 10 minutes. And we did. And that's how she built up, her comfort level. And we had her fill out a sheet of paper, what I want to tell my teachers, one thing I want to tell my parents, one thing I'm proud of at school, one thing I wish I could change about school. And we prepared that ahead of time, and she brought it and she read it to her team. And it was really insightful. It was very insightful. So by 8th grade, by 8th grade, she was very comfortable in advocating for herself and talking to her team, and that was her personality, but it was also those opportunities, finding those opportunities to practice, to make decisions, even if they're small decisions, giving choices. But it's a part-time job. It's a part-time job. And so that's why I love these resources that you've included, especially those from the National Technical Assistance Center, NTAC. And we're fortunate that we have so many resources that are evidence-based, that, promote best practice, that we can take and use them at home with our families, or use them with our school folks or with our medical providers. So you've got to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah, and I can just share my screen for a minute.
Please. And while you're pulling that up, actually, we do have one question from our audience right now, and they write, my 23-year-old would love to live independently. How do we find him a roommate and an apartment? Where is there supported housing in Rhode Island? How do we find it?
That's a loaded question, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's big, right? It's kind of a big, where do we begin, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to let some of my friends here answer, but we could spend a whole week on this topic. And I'm always going to go back to the networking with other families, networking with other groups, and really looking at, so at the age of 23, what services are you currently receiving? What supports is that individual currently receiving? And then sitting down with the individual and their circle of support on what's possible, what's affordable, what do you qualify for, and kind of doing like person-centered planning, really kind of picking apart what's available. And I'm going to let one of my friends here please chime in. If you could talk a little bit about your experiences working with young adults with disabilities, what you're seeing.
Well, I can speak from the perspective of some of the graduates from our programs who are probably in their mid to late 20s now, are starting to move into apartments. Most of them are supported through BHDDH. And it usually begins with putting your name on the Section 8 housing list.
Yes.
You can do that in a number of different communities. I suggest, communities that you would like to live in if you want to be close to family. But also, like Sue said about those networks of people. And finding a roommate, and most people can tell you it's not easy. You think somebody might be a good roommate, but you want to make sure that you're compatible, because living within four walls with somebody is a lot different than being friends. But it really comes down to planning how the services will be delivered. Does the person need just check in? Do they need somebody to, regular, support if they have an issue 24/7? Do they need that level of support? So really it's figuring out what they're able to do and what level of support is appropriate. Because there is support that's available through BHTDH funding, especially if you were to have a roommate. You could be a little bit more creative with that.
And as I'm shaking my head, you hear me and you see me, yes, to everything that Teresa's saying. This is not a conversation that's one time only. This is going to continue to evolve. All of those questions are so individual to the, and unique to the person. But to really think about that, I love your point is, yeah, he's my best friend or she's my best friend. But your roommate, to truly be able to live with this person, is a challenge. But even if that's the decision, because it's about choice, then the guidance comes in. Well, let's almost make kind of guidelines for how we live. You know what I mean? Now you're living with someone else. I get up at later in the day or stay up, later at night. And those kinds of things might sound silly, but really having that conversation with who you're going to be living with, if you choose to, both of you as individuals, share those kind of things. Well, I like pets. Well, I'm allergic to pets. Or can we have a fish? Those kind of things are important, in this process. And in regards to the supports through BHDDH, yes, absolutely. When your name is on a list, you're going to see those lists are very long. So, don't give up. keep a regular check-in, or have that support that, okay, I called like last month and, I committed to myself that I'm going to, give a check-in call to where I am on the list every month. Have I moved up on the list? And, or in that process, you've, chose 3 in your community, 3 places that you would really like to live. Are there maybe others? Let's revisit that. You might see something else in that time on your journey, of exploration. So that's something I would recommend as well.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because
Right.
part of what we forget sometimes about independent living and developing into an adult is that we make mistakes, and sometimes that's how we learn what our preferences are, things that we like and don't like. I think I might want to do this, and I try it and I find I hate it. Or you insist you're going to move in with this person and they steal all your food and wear your clothes. So,
Right. Yep.
sometimes you just don't know until you try it.
Yep. And I think that's really important, for saying that, and we can really not say that enough, when we think about ourselves, right? And in regards to the lessons and things that I've learned the most, or remember, are the mistakes I've made, right? The things that I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, but I needed to do that, so I know, and it guides me in a different direction. So that's part of the process. Yeah. So the Parents of Teens Survival Checklist, I think this is really great.
This I go back to all the time, because like I said, it can be overwhelming when you try and think about all of the things that a person needs to do. But obviously not everybody needs to do all of these things. But it's a nice checklist to kind of get you thinking about, what types of things do you need to do for daily living. It's fairly involved, but using a roadmap. I mean, some of these, they're dated as we move forward because of apps on phones. But but simple things like you were saying, Joanne, hanging a picture, painting a room, reading, appliances, basic carpentry, some questions about sexuality, communication, personal grooming, current events, employment, transportation. So these are all just kind of a jump off point for conversations. And usually what we do is we go through this and then prioritize, what absolutely needs to happen for this individual, and especially as they get older.
I think I saw bacon on this list, which just makes me chuckle, because there are some people in this household that would eat bacon 3 times a day. So, just, hey, but personal choice, right? I guess that's a keto diet, right? Some of the families that we've worked with over the years, I know there was a young lady who at a very young age, she was in middle school, and she was very good at, and her family was very good at helping her identify who to go to for different types of problems. So it's like, okay, so if you can't discuss something with mom or dad, if you're having boyfriend, girlfriend, kind of issues, who do you go to? Oh, I'd go to my sister-in-law. She would say, she knew her guidance counselors, and she even knew the guidance department. So if my guidance counselor is not available, she would ask, is there another counselor available? Because I need to talk to someone about something right now. Okay. And, they would sit down and she would list the people who to go to for what support. She had a brother that was very good with money. So she would call the brother before she would talk to her parents, because she knew he was good at money and he was probably better than her parents were. So it's setting up folks with those tools. We also had another a young man, a terrific young man, who as he was going through transition, one of his parents decided that they wanted to petition the court for guardianship for him. And we were surprised by this. And this young man was very upset about that idea. So the first thing, when the letter came, he had someone read the letter to him because his reading level was very low. He used to get all of his news and information by television, internet, those types of things, listening to the news. And he would have a wonderful conversation with you about what was going on, you know, in the environment, politically, and different things. And so when he realized that his parent was going to sue him for guardianship, the first thing he did was he called his bank and he asked for the bank manager. Now, who thinks of this? Not me, right? He calls the bank manager and he says, hey, I want to ask you a question. This is my name and I have my accounts at your bank. And am I a good customer? Yes, absolutely. You are. You know, you've never had any problems with your accounts. You've never been overdrawn. You've never, you know. And it's okay. Well, could I come and get a letter? Could you give me a letter saying that? And the bank manager said, absolutely. Well, this young man continued different aspects in his life, and he got letters from other folks, and that's what he took to court. And needless to say, he won his own custody battle, and there was no need for guardianship. So, you know, stories like that, I always love hearing how resilient our kids can be.
That's an incredible story. I'm really glad you shared that. So one question
Could
we
I
have.
just?
Oh
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
please.
I was just going
Go
to
ahead.
add, if I could, Mark, I'll be brief. Add to that story. It's a great story, but it really brings us back to just kind of taking that step back and looking at this individual as just a human being, just like all of us. And I see that, really from the most authentic place in my heart, that when you're having these conversations, like, we would not even say, who would think to do that? Well, he would, and he's ready to do that. So when we present them, individuals with these focus areas or these opportunities for discussion on where they're at, we're educating them in the process and showing them the way, and they'll surprise us, right? When you hear those stories, right? And it's like, so many times we just never even gave it a thought, and our first reaction is, well, they can't. We always go to, well, they can't because, and we have this whole list, and the person themselves was like, no, I can, and I'll show you, or let me show you. And that just resonates within me, even stories like that, that we can remember those things and have that guide us, in our conversations on what's next, or what could be next, and let them choose.
Absolutely.
I apologize, Mark, please.
Oh, no, that's quite all right. No, I'm looking at Facebook, our Facebook live stream, where we have some viewers, and one question, it's kind of a comment, but really there's a question behind it. And they write, I find it hard to, especially during distance learning and during the pandemic, they write, I find it hard to not only work on these things, but to do it all alone with no job coach or paraprofessional support, is what they wrote. And I think the question behind that is, what supports are available out there? And you all have touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about what supports and resources are out there for parents, whether it's RIPIN or something else.
Yeah, I think with everybody doing so many different things right now, some people are hybrid, some people are full virtual, some people are, it really is difficult, especially for parents that are working.
Mm-hmm.
If you have parents working and you're home, your student is doing virtual education. I mean, I can't even imagine it. This is, people are throwing out all the time, it's an unprecedented time, but it truly is. It's, I consider myself pretty old at this point, and I've never experienced anything even close to this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing, and this goes for everybody with everything they're doing, is don't expect a lot of yourself. Just take one day at a time.
Yeah.
Because if you will be overwhelmed. There's no book, there's no guidelines on how to deal with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say for parents distance learning is to, to have, if you need more support in the home, ask for an IEP review. You can always, get the team together through Zoom and say, these are the things that we're running into. What types of supports can we look
Yes.
at? I know that our teacher at the academy uses a lot of, I mean, she's young and she's, the YouTube savvy, websites, apps, and there's a lot of things out there, from, timers and, just all different types of technology that can be helpful, to keep to make a person more independent. And that actually Tech Access is having their virtual conference in December, which is something that, parents might want to look into as well. And it's techaccess.org, and it's their assistive technology
Yep, I have it right
conference
here.
of New
Is-
England.
Is it December or I
December
actually, I
7th.
just,
Yeah, it's December 7th from 2 to 5. And this segment is entitled Everything Engagement for Students with Disabilities During Synchronous Learning Sessions. Now, they will have sessions throughout the next few months as well. But it's definitely something I would say to look into. I'm glad you brought that up, Teresa, talking about engagement, of how to engage our students from wherever they're learning and however they're learning. And a point that you made, Teresa, is just, I think, so important to remember and to say often. We don't know what we're doing until we do it, right? So, and everyone is feeling, and there's always some other person, there's one other person in the room feeling or sharing the same kind of thought that you are. Another parent somewhere is like, oh my God, I had that same question, right? Be kind to yourself, ask, your teacher, communicating with your teacher first, and asking for IEP reviews, saying that is important because a lot of parents might not know that. And I'm sure you guys do reinforce that it doesn't only just have to be that one time, in the year, if you need it again, and then you communicate that, and then you plan that, and you look at where you're at and what you can insert at that time. And that's
a lot of IEPs were written pre-COVID.
Correct.
we found that a lot of that has needed to change.
Yes.
And I think that, as far as paraprofessionals, having assistance, we have, sometimes our paras will work with students in groups, because the Zooms, you have breakout chat rooms, and, they're off doing different things. So there are ways to engage that might not be face-to-face, but are just as effective sometimes. So, and then I always have to plug RIPIN.
Yeah.
They're a great resource for anything to do with parents. And I'm sure that they're getting a lot of those types of questions right now.
Thank you, Teresa. Later in the week, we have someone from BHDDH who will be with us. And on Friday, we have our friends from the Office of Rehabilitation Services. And so these are other state agencies that your child may be eligible for, and the schools, your IEP team, your case manager will start inviting them and making those linkages as you're going through transition, in that transition planning process, which, in Rhode Island, you can start it at 14, or you can start it at 12, or you can start it at 5, and then talk to your sons or daughters about what they want to do when they grow up, right? What they going to do that's right. You're walking, you need to get a job.
We're talking about transition,
right? But I was just reminded, Teresa mentioned about the Section 8 housing. And we, Sharon and I have a dear friend who had put her daughter on the Section 8 housing list very early because she knew it was going to take a while. So she did it very early. And I said, is she ready to move out? No, but that's okay. Because, we can say no 2 times before your name goes to the bottom of the list. I didn't know that. I said, okay. So time went on, and a couple of times something came up and they said no. And then the 3rd time something came up and it was really ideal. It was a new development. It was not far from family and friends. It was really lovely. So they said yes. So I said, have you talked to your daughter about this yet? Do you know, does she, how, did you tell dad yet? because dad was like, no, she's never moving out. She's going to stay with me forever. And, and this gal, I thought mom was so clever. They started with the mom would take the young woman to the apartment and they would sleep over on weekends, just weekends. And for the first couple months, mom and dad would take turns. The brother even took a turn, come check out Sis's new apartment. And they did that for a couple months. And I was like, brilliant. You know, it's like, I never thought of that because I'm kind of a all or nothing person. I never think about, oh, wait a minute, you could take baby steps in between. And she created a slow transition.
Nice.
So it may have been a little over a year, but then this young woman was staying there more often. She was doing more things at her apartment. Nothing has to be all or nothing. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. So
Yes, and again, there goes the power of, well, I say RIPIN as well. I will give you kudos. I always do, not only here in this moment, but it seems like I'm always saying something in a great way, like Teresa, with our teachers and so on. But the networks of support. I mean, even like, look, like this conversation right here and individuals that are listening, like, oh my God, I'm writing this down. I never thought that I'm at that same place or soon to be at that place, you know, and you're bringing something now for them to take a look at, sit with, cultivate, and make it their own. But that's brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
no, Sharon, Crystal, please pipe up. I know.
I was going to say, as far as that last question that came in about like trying to figure out how to do some more stuff at home, that I think like schools are having to be, it's just trying to be more creative. And, you know, maybe you can't get everything done, but even just cooking a meal together, you know, the student's going to be learning, you know, measurement stuff, like their living skills, but it's also math and everything. So I think it's just finding creative ways to maybe build in some of those daily living stuff that's important, but it could also be related to school and, you know, just only trying to focus on one thing at a time. And maybe you're not going to get to everything each day. And then I think another, if the student is Medicaid eligible and they're of age, they could look into past services or HBTS as well.
Yep.
I know sometimes it might be a little difficult right now with COVID, or maybe you don't want people coming into the home, but if that is something that's really needed, that is an option to look into as well if they're not ready out of school for adult services. But just to have that additional support to kind of help with the distant learning or help with those daily living skills and building them up, I think that's a resource to still look into as well.
Yep. I was just going to say that, Crystal. That's what we use right now to help with our daily living skills, our safety in the community, our decision making, where he's working with his past worker. In the summer, it was great because they were outside, but now that it's a little bit chillier and things are inside, we do some virtual sessions, and maybe on those 1 hour sessions, they're creating a list of chores, and my plants are finally getting watered after like 3 weeks. So I think it's great.
We often find that families, they don't even realize all the resources that they have, the natural resources. And sometimes we'll sit with someone and we'll be talking, oh, no, you know, she's got no one. It's like, okay, are you guys involved in a faith-based organization? Oh, yeah, well, yeah, there's that. But okay, is there any other does she play a sport? Is she on a team? Is she involved in a club? Oh, well, yeah. What about scouts? So you've really got to look at what's going on in that young person's life, and what opportunities they have, but also what networks of support you can build right there, you know, and skill building, you know, as well.
I think too, and that just made me think in regards to think of the things that the young person does just naturally that they do, right, in the home, like when Krista was saying, when she was saying about cooking and so on. But there are things that you can build on and say, wow, you know, I never taught them that, but they do that. Like every morning they do this, right? So even look at that for a starting place and build upon that. And then those skills are obviously will translate into so many other aspects of life, and acknowledge that, like, wow, every Saturday they do this without even being prompted, right? And then we work on that too. Some thoughts. Mark, we got more coming. This is great.
Well, this has been really great, really great insight and experiences that you all are sharing. Definitely have time for more questions. I want to encourage folks who are watching to submit your questions here in the chat on Zoom, in the comments on the Facebook live stream, on YouTube chat, however you're watching us today. If you have a question for our panelists, please pass it along. One thought that I was having is sort of, maybe it might be helpful to talk about what exactly, because I don't know that we get into this too much. What exactly do the regional transition coordinators, what is that role? How does somebody interact with that? What does that look like? I think maybe some folks would like to know more of the nuts and bolts behind that.
Okay. I'm going to let Teresa begin because she's very seasoned at this. She is. And then I will add.
The regional transition coordinators are, each of us has a regional transition center, north, south, east, and west in Rhode Island. Kerry Collins is the Southern Rhode Island transition coordinator, and Jennifer Doucette is the Northern transition coordinator. And you're going to see them this week for different sessions that they'll be doing with RIPIN. The regional transition centers are created out of a contract with the Department of Education. Because we are a smaller state, it made more sense to combine resources to create the centers to service a number of different districts. So what we provide is we have our regional transition advisory committees, which is made up of, we have RIPIN parents, adult service providers, teachers, really anybody who's interested in transition can join those. We also provide a lot of support and training to teachers. We do professional development on a lot of different topics in transition, a lot of virtual training now with what's going on. We also provide a vocational programming within our agencies for youth through the Office of Rehabilitation Services. And we also work with parents. We work very closely with the Rhode Island Parent Information Network. We are
Also
at the end of, we're at the end of the telephone for any parents that have questions about transition. I know that a lot of times RIPIN will refer people to, depending on where they live, to one of us to answer specific questions about IEPs or about transition. So we really kind of work with anybody who's interested or involved in transition. We've been around since the mid-90s, so hopefully it'll continue.
Well, that sums it up. More. I would like to just add with to what Teresa said, and think of, when we think of the word transition, we think of, and we should think of, self-determination, right? So self-determination, we know, comes first, right? What do you want your life to look like, right? And how meaningful and how thoughtful we can be in that process of constant communication, dialogue all the time throughout that we call transition 14 and over. But you said, like, we just start from very young. How can you just be involved in making decisions about who you are as you learn about who you are and how you want to live your life and carry that through. So when we focus on independent living, and I'm actually taking a look at the chat, Mark, as we can see, all of us is interested in learning more about, saying independent living is not just moving into an apartment, Correct. It's about getting to know yourself, right? And be self-determined. What do you want your life to look like? Huge question. And then we teach, we expose individuals to what those possibilities are, right, on this journey, and then teach how to self-advocate, right? How to ask for things, or how to look for things, or how to make those decisions that can assist them in creating this life. So as RTCs, we do have the opportunity to do everything that Teresa said and more directly with our teachers, right? And our students that we represent and we support within districts.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that goes back to looking at self regulation and executive functioning as,
yes.
When we think of independent living, to be independent, we really have to regulate ourselves. It's not just cooking, cleaning, and or being independent in an apartment. It really is having those skills to be able to navigate into adult life.
Yes.
So we never want to forget those. Those are very important.
And it's so important for parents, to assist us in our schools and support our schools as we support them, they support us in this collaborative relationship to build upon the self-determination, to teach those skills, to begin teaching those skills very young, and then continue. And we support them as well in what they're teaching, but to identify and to label self-determination and what that means, and just make that part of every day. So that's how they can assist us in as we assist them as well. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. I think that this is, one thought that I'm having right now, thinking about have a young adult child. They're having a lot of these thoughts and struggling through next steps, and they may not be aware that these types of resources and supports exist. It can be very difficult for us to communicate to the sort of public at large that we're here to help with these things. And for those of you who are on the webinar today, listening in live, you found us, and you have some idea that these resources and supports exist. And I would hope that I could encourage you to share with others that there are these regional transition centers that can help, and RIPIN, of course, is here to help and provide really that kind of one-on-one support. I don't know if anyone from the RIPIN team can talk a little bit about, we've touched on it, but maybe just a little bit more about how can RIPIN help a parent who's in this situation navigate. My child is getting older, is about to graduate from high school. We're all wondering what's next.
And, I'm going to ask Sharon, could you share a little bit about some of our partners that we work with, other agencies that we refer families to, or we work in conjunction with, just to give them an idea. We may be a little state, but sometimes that's beneficial.
Right. So thank you. So sometimes when the family comes to me looking for resources, some of the questions we'll ask is, he's not going to be in school forever, or he or she, and what's going to happen when the bus stops coming. So one of the state agencies that we look to is Behavioral Healthcare Developmental Disabilities in Hospitals, or BHDDH. And what they do is provide lifelong support for individuals with disabilities. There's an application process that myself, Crystal, and some other team members can help with to get you found eligible, but they're not services that you would access until you left the school. Another agency that we look to a lot is Office of Rehab Services, and they are the piece that helps with employment. They help a family or a young individual do some job exploration, maybe do some work trials in the community to gain some experience, to see what kind of support they might need in order to maintain a job. And then there's also Disability Rights Rhode Island can also help when we're looking at our students turning 18 and becoming adults, but we still, mom, Johnny and I have a relationship, and we know that they want us to make decisions, but how can we formalize those decisions so that, and you know, if something happens to Johnny and he goes to the hospital, that they'll know to be able to release information to you, things like that. Crystal, do you have more to add?
So yes, yeah, I think those are all the pretty much agencies during transition, but it's also just even other resources like a lot of times parents need help applying for Social Security, SSI, and you know, when your child turns 18, it's only based on their income and not the household anymore. And sometimes that can be helpful because it might be a little bit before they're going to figure out what they want to do for employment or be able to, you know, get to a meaningful employment that's going to provide enough income for them. So sometimes getting an SSI before they leave high school can be helpful. Making sure that even if they have Medicaid before leaving high school, when they turn 18, they still do need to switch over to that adult Medicaid piece to access some of those adult services or different things that we had mentioned that could be available for them. So kind of helping, you know, do that process as well. So any kind of transition related resources, we're always working with partners and figuring out what we can share. And we do have recorded live webinars too on our site with some of those processes and some of the people talking about the different agencies or different things that are available for kids in transition.
I just wanted to include some of our local folks, like the Autism Project. They're very active and they provide some wonderful training and also technical assistance for our classrooms. The Sherlock Center over on the RIC campus, they're very active and we work closely with them. Advocates in Action, they help prepare young adults with developmental disabilities around advocacy and learning advocacy and the importance of voting and policy and how those things are done, as well as the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council. They also help support families and really advocate for policy change and person-centered, family, consumer-centered practices throughout the state for all systems of care.
And right in the chat here on Zoom, I put the link to our website, so that has contact information for all of us. And no question is ever silly. So, you know, anytime, the best way to get us nowadays is through email. And, you know, we're all very great about, you know, responding to questions. Or if we don't know the answer, we can probably find somebody that can help.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Also, too, adding the Parent Support Network as well.
Yes.
As a partner in the heart of behavioral health is another resource as well for parents.
They have a wonderful youth group that they, you know, support and have been for many years now.
And that website for folks who might be listening in is risecondarytransition.org.
Yes.
And you can also, of course, get some of the recorded webinars and other resources that were mentioned from RIPIN at RIPIN, www.ripin.org. And, you know, one of the things I'm thinking as I'm hearing this is there are these resources, lots of organizations and entities that can help navigate some of those. You know, these systems are complicated when you start talking about services from BHDDH or when you start talking about dealing with Social Security. And these folks have that experience and they can walk you through that. And that's great. But I think there's also just a huge amount of value in just having somebody to talk to and kind of maybe bounce ideas off of, and maybe get, you know, having that conversation is going to allow you to maybe think of things that you hadn't thought of before. And I think it's great that you're all out there helping parents in that way, because I'm sure it's hugely meaningful for them. This has been great. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us. Huge thanks to Joanne, Delangelo, Therese Curran, for joining us. And if you're out there listening, we're doing this all week. We're going to be back tomorrow again at 3 o'clock. Tomorrow we're talking about, what do we have tomorrow, Sue? Help me out.
I have it open.
Oh, Sue, you're muted. Sorry. Oh, I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And tomorrow we have Kieran O'Donnell, who he works at the John E. Fogarty Center, and Susan Hayward from the Rhode Island Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Hospitals. And we're going to be talking about community participation. My
Community
favorite topic.
participation.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, folks, you can see the whole schedule on ripin.org. If you go to our website and there's a big banner at the top, you can click to see the whole schedule for Transition to Adulthood Week, these live Q&As, on-demand webinars, lots of other resources. So we hope that you'll join us. But until then, I want to thank you all again and wish everyone a good rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you.